Let's get started with Model Monday for the day. We just finished up a project last week, so we're going to get started with a new project. However, I got a request, and as you know, if you show up to class enough and put out a request, I just do that thing. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the request I've gotten to go through every tool. I think this is a great idea. So there are a lot of tools here in the Create menu. There are a lot more tools in the Modify menu. And, you know, we tend to just focus on a few of them. I think there's some overlap probably. Like you can definitely make a rib without using the rib tool. However, maybe it's much easier to make a rib using the rib tool. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through each of these tools in the Create menu, see how far we get, and we'll go through them from top to bottom. And if we get to one that I haven't used, like I've never used the web tool before, we'll have to learn that one together. All right, so let's get started by creating a new document or a new design here. So I'm going to click on the new design plus button there in the tabs. And thankfully, the first item at the top of the Create menu is the new component menu. The new component option, excuse me. So a component is what we have started with already. So right now I've already got a component you can see here in my browser. It's called unsaved because I have not saved this file at all. So you have a component, and a component is an origin and sketches and bodies. It's kind of like an organizational system. It's the top level organizational system in Fusion. So if we choose from the Create menu the new component option, if I just go ahead and click on new component, we get our new component window that pops up, and I can name this component. It's a thing. It's our component called thing, or stuff, or whatever you want to call it. I won't judge your names. We're making a new component that's internal, so you can make an external component, but that would be basically making a new document. So, you know, we've already made a new document. We don't need to do that. We can make a component from existing bodies, but we don't have any bodies right now. We've done this before. A few weeks ago, we made components from existing bodies. So if you've already got bodies made and you want to convert them into components, you can use this little checkbox to do that. We are going to leave this checkbox that says active turned on. So I'm just going to say OK, and then I'll explain that active checkbox now. So once we have created a component, now we have two components technically. We have our main document component that's called unsaved, and we have our new component that we just created. Mine is called thing here. That active option or checkbox refers to this little radio button next to the component name. So if I hover over our main document component and I click that little radio button, this component becomes the active component. And what that means is anytime you use any other option from the Create menu, like making a sketch or extruding a shape or doing a sweep or a loft, all of those things will happen inside of the component that you have as your active component. So if I make a new sketch here in unsaved, it'll make a sketch in my unsaved component. If I choose new sketch while I have my thing component active, it'll make a sketches folder inside of my thing component. Does that make sense? So kind of like top level organization there. The next item down is one that we'll have a lot of experience with. So And we'll use it. I've never, gosh, there's stuff at the top here that I've never used. This is going to be exciting. All right, so let's go ahead and create a sketch if you've never created a sketch before, or if you've never used, frankly, any of these tools in the Create menu. These tool tips are fantastic. So the tool tips tell you how to use the tool and what the tool does. So if I choose this Create Sketch option, and now if I just say didn't read that instructions fully on how to use the sketch tool, how to create a sketch, if I just stop moving my mouse again, I get the little tooltip that says, hey, I'm supposed to select a plane or plein face. So these three squares, the three yellow squares that I see floating here, those are the planes that it's given me to select right off the bat, and I'm just going to go ahead and choose the one in between my green and my red axis. That's my top plane. So if I just click on that, now I'm making a sketch here. So all of my tools at the top have changed to sketching tools. We've got a whole new set of tools in our Create menu. Maybe I'll spare going through every tool in the sketching menu. Maybe two-dimensional sketches are a little bit more user-friendly. Do we have agreement there? Kind of? Two-dimensional sketches a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I can.
Oh. So... You got it. Okay, cool. You must have just, did you click a plane?
I did.
Okay. Cool. So now that we've created a sketch here, well, let's draw a thing on it. So from the Create menu, let's just go ahead and grab the 2-point rectangle tool. This will just be an easy tool to use. So I'll go ahead and grab that 2-point rectangle tool, and I'll click to place my first point, and then I'm going to move my mouse. And now when you see numbers, I encourage people to let go of your mouse and grab a hold of your trusty keyboard and just start typing some numbers. So I can make this 3 by 2, let's say, or however big you'd like to make your item. If you haven't changed your document settings so you're drawing in freedom units, you can type in inches if you like, or if you want to draw in the standard of measurement that the rest of the world uses, you can just type in millimeters there and it will automatically do that conversion for you. I could even type in 0.2 feet and it would give me however many 0.2 feet is. I don't know why you would have a measurement that is 0.2 feet. Probably more like 1 feet would be a more reasonable measurement, but again, I'm not here to judge. All right, so 2 by 3 is what I'm making, and then to bounce between the two measurements to bounce between measurements in a sketch. So this could be 2 different dimensions. It could be a dimension and an angle. There are a couple of different measurements that sometimes you bounce between depending on which sketching tool you are using. I use the tab key. So the tab just bounces me back and forth between my length and my width. And then when I've entered both of those dimensions, I hit enter.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I'm just going to go ahead and click Finish Sketch now. So now I've got a nice rectangle drawn.
Finish sketch.
Yeah, Finish Sketch is in the top right-hand corner. There are a couple ways you can finish a sketch. So I have 2 sketches for some reason because I went back. So if I could choose the Finish Sketch icon in the top right-hand corner of my screen. The other way that I can finish this sketch is here on my sketch palette. I've got this little sketch palette that floats around, and there is a Finish Sketch button on the bottom of that sketch palette. So, 2 ways you can finish the sketch there. Alright, so we've got a sketch. I always encourage people, name your sketches as you go. This is our rectangle or our box or a square or whatever you want to call it. Anything is better than sketch 1. So I'm going to go ahead and rename that. And the way I do that is by clicking once and then pausing and clicking a second time. And now I can type in whatever I want in this text field and hit enter, and now I have a sketch called box. All right. It's handy that create sketch option is the second menu item, because almost everything else will require a sketch of some sort, for the most part. So I'm going to skip over the create form option, and derive is kind of, derive is based on other things that you would have drawn already, so we might have to come back to that and do that later. But we can bounce down to the extrude option. So an extrude is a fairly basic kind of creation tool. So if I click on the extrude option, if you've only got one item drawn, chances are it will highlight it for you, because you don't have anything except for that to extrude. So I think Fusion just goes, hey, this only thing you have drawn, is that what you want to extrude? However, if you don't have it selected and you just see your extrude window, the profile that you want to extrude is our sketch that we just made here, our little box. Once you highlight that as your selected item, there's a little blue arrow, and you can push and pull on this blue arrow in either direction. You notice if I go in one direction, this extrusion value is a positive number, so it's positive 0.7. And if I push it the other direction, it is a negative number. So it is a negative 0.7, or however many you type in there. So then you get that blue arrow that you can kind of push or pull around, right? We could type in a number there. Yeah. Cool. So we just had that. I think that's a good tip here. So we were just like, hey, I clicked on this thing. I don't see my blue arrow, right? How come I can't see my extrude arrow? And we're kind of looking straight down at the top of this square, rectangle, I should say. So if we change our view, so we're looking at it a little bit more from an angle, then it's easier to see that extrusion that you're making, especially when you're thinking about the direction that it needs to go, because it's all the same. When you're looking at it this way, if this is a negative number, it would look exactly the same. It just goes in the other way. So a couple of things about the extrude menu options, right? So there'll be a lot of options that are similar to the extrude window here as we go down our list of things in the create menu. First is the profile, the start of our extrusion. So our extrusion is starting at the profile plane. And what that means is it's starting from the point in space where our two-dimensional drawing is. However, you can choose to extrude from an offset if you want. And if you change that start item to offset, then there's a little number that pops up right underneath that offset, and we can type in a value there, like I just typed in 1 inch. And you can see now that that extrusion is starting 1 inch away from the sketch that we made, and then going out a distance of 3/4 of an inch. We can also change the direction that our extrude goes. And now this direction option doesn't refer to the negative or positive, if it's extruding out towards you or away from you. It refers to how many directions it's extruding. So right now we're extruding on one side, we're extruding one direction. You can extrude symmetrically, which would mean that it extrudes out both directions from your sketch at the same time in the exact same amount. So here you can see that I'm starting my extrusion 1 inch away from that plane, and then extruding equally 3/4 of an inch in each direction there. The other option here in this direction menu was to do 2 sides. And now this made my extrude window get much bigger, and now I can extrude out a different amount in each of those directions. So I can extrude out 0.75 in one direction and 0.5 in another direction, and I can change them independently of each other. The last thing that I'll point out, I'm going to change this to back to one side just because it makes that window smaller. The last thing that I'll point out here is I kind of tend to call this the modifier. So almost every tool will have some sort of modifier, and usually it's either twist or taper. So in the case of an extrusion, it's a taper, and what that means is you can change this to some degrees, like -20. -20 will give me a 20-degree angle tapering in. So you can see it's kind of shrinking in like a pyramid would, and if I extrude this out further, it'll just kind of taper down to nothing if I have it extrude out that far. You can also do a positive number, and that will expand it instead of tapering it. I'm going to leave this at 0, I think. I'm pretty sure I'm going to leave it at 0. Yeah, I'll leave it at 0. Alright, and then I'm going to click OK here. Alright, so now we've got a body that we can name. This body is our box. So I rename that body the same way I rename a sketch. I click once, pause for a second, click a second time, and then I can call it a cube or a box or a platonic solid, whatever you want to call it that makes sense in your head. Alright, so the next item in our create menu is the revolve option. So we have enough sketches drawn to do a revolve. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that revolve option. Again, because I've only got one item selected, or one item drawn, it automatically has selected that as the profile, which is fine. The thing that it has not selected and that you will need to select is the axis. So we've got a shape, and now it's going to revolve that shape around an axis. So if I choose this select button here and I pick on any one of my 4 axes, you can see it's going to spin that around that axis. So if I pick this axis at the top here, you can see it'll spin that around, and I'll kind of show you the side view of this so you can kind of imagine what's happening here. And this will illustrate the last item that I did not discuss in the Extrude dialog box, and that will be in every one of these options in our create menu here, is the operation. So when we started, the operation was set to new body, and what that does is just makes a new body. So there'll be a new body in your bodies folder if you choose this new body option. Because this body is intersecting in space with an existing body, the default was to make it a cut. So it's saying you want to use this body to subtract away from the existing body that already lives there. Another option here that is that I don't use a whole lot is this. Actually, you can also choose to join these bodies together. So that would be instead of making a new body, you'd have one body. Instead of 2 bodies over here, you'd have one body that's just this one weird looking, I don't know, backwards letter A, let's call it, without a hole in it. The other option is this intersect option. So that's kind of, it's the opposite of cutting, I guess I would say. It's creating an intersection. When you did the cut, this is the representation of what was being cut away from that body. So it's the intersection between those 2 shapes. Follow me? Cool. I'm gonna make this a new body. New body's good, and we'll just say okay. Alright, so I've got a new body to name here. This new body is, it's a cylinder. Or it's a circle. Alright, I'm going to hide it for now, because I've got a lot of things kind of overlapping each other right now. We're just trying to illustrate these tools. You can hide or show any body or any sketch, or any component for that matter. I can hide this entire component just by clicking on the little eyeball icon next to each individual body. Alright, the next item down from Revolve is the sweep option. Sweep will sweep a profile along a path. So in order to sweep a profile along a path, we need to have a path. And in order to have a path, we're going to need to have a sketch. So we've already got our profile that we can sweep. I'll go ahead and turn off my cube as well. Actually, I should probably name these after the tool. This is our extrude body. This is our revolve body there. Now, to make a sweep, like I said, we need a path. In order to, let's take a look at my origin. That'll work. If you hopefully created your box connected to our origin here, we just need to make a sweep that runs kind of horizontally, or gosh, how do I describe that? It's perpendicular to the orientation of our box. So from the create menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose the create sketch option in order to make my sweep path. And I'm going to pick one of the planes that is not the plane that I chose to draw my first sketch on. So I chose to draw my first sketch on this front plane. I can either pick the side or the bottom. Either one will work just fine to illustrate this, but it'll affect how you make your sweep, I guess. But so we can pick either one of these. I'm going to go ahead and pick my side here. Something that is very important when making a sweep path is here our box is connected to our origin, so it's got a point at that 0, 0, 0. In order for the sweep to work, our sweep path also has to be connected to that 0, 0, 0 point. So if I grabbed my, say, spline tool and I made a spline out here, while that's a very nice sweep path, it is not connected to the origin, so they have to have a common point where they line up with each other, if that makes sense. So I can't sweep this profile along this path because they don't have any common points. So I'll go ahead and delete that. We could have forced that to get into submission here, but we'll just choose to draw it again. So now from the Create menu, if we all come down and draw ourselves a funny looking spline. So I'm going to come down to Create, Spline, and I'm going to choose Fit Point Spline. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and now I'm going to make sure that I put my first point of my spline on my origin. And I'm just going to click and place a couple of points. So the spline tool works similar to the pen tool if you're familiar with Illustrator at all. You kind of click and place a couple of these points, and now I have these control arms that I can move around and tweak the shape of my curve with these arms. I can also move these points around, and that will tweak my shape a little bit. Once I've got that path drawn, I can go ahead and say Finish Sketch. So now I've got a sketch I can name, so I'm just going to click one time, click a second time, so I can rename that sketch my sweep path. So that is the path I'm going to sweep along. Oh, I made a real big one. All right. I didn't realize I made that big of a sweep, but that's totally fine. All right, so now we can use that sweep tool, which is the next one in our list. So I'll go ahead and click on Sweep from the Create menu. Analysis, that's interesting. All right, so now I can click on the profile that I'm gonna sweep, which is that rectangle that we chose, right, our box. Over here in our sweep window, the next item in the list here is the path that I can select. And then that's going to go ahead and sweep that shape. It's kind of use that path and kind of extrude along that shape. So we've got a funny looking bendy bit there. I'll point out the end here. Mike, did you have, or Mike joining us online, you had a question?
I do. How do you define or dimension a spline?
That is a good question. So a spline is a difficult thing to dimension. So here I'm going to go back and right click and say edit this sketch. And you know, everybody knows that I like to have like a lot of black lines in my drawings. And splines are difficult to get to be like that. You can add constraints to the control arms for a spline. So, like this control arm here, I can add a constraint that is like horizontal vertical. And I can kind of constrain that to being horizontal vertical. I can do that with all of these. And if I do that with all of these, I still don't have a fully constrained sketch. I could make those points line up on a grid. Go ahead, other Mike.
Okay. Mine just threw a FOAD message at me. It says the body would intersect itself. Try reducing the taper angle, which is at 0, or removing regions of high curvature. That means that you can't use a real zigzaggy spline path.
Yeah, so if your path is the other option or thing that will pop up when we're doing a spline, other than like it being not very easy to constrain, is if you have a bunch of weird, crazy, sharp curves. Like here, I've got a bunch of sharp curves. That sweep, that's the revolve. If I choose to sweep along that really zigzaggy path, it will probably swear at me. Oh, it did that one. But depending on how zigzaggy we get, you can see here, the more I bend this, the more I get a weird little angle here. If I keep going, it will probably break all together. And it looks like that is broken all together, and my sweep icon has gotten turned yellow, saying that there's a little problem down here. So there's only so much you can bend a shape. You can, so steep an angle you can get to. The other thing is a sweep cannot make a 90-degree turn. It can't make an angled turn at all. There has to be some sort of radius that it's going along. So if I edit this sketch again, maybe a better example here is like I could make a straight line and then a straight line up. And I could dimension both of these things so they'd be nice and constrained, right? And if I say finish sketch and I choose my sweep path as, oh, look at that, it does it. What is the tool that won't do that? I can't believe it made that 90-degree turn.
On mine, it said that the path was tangent to the profile. Is that what you were getting after?
Yeah, sometimes you get an error where it's like, hey, we can't make that turn.
Yeah, I got it. Yep.
And a lot of times I've had that when our bends are too tight or I've got a 90-degree turn in there. I feel like we had that problem when we were doing the money shooting tool in this class, like months ago. Anyway, so a way you can get around that, here I'll just say okay, is you can add a fillet to your sketch. So if you have a turn that it won't get past, you can try adding a fillet to that turn, and you can make the fillet pretty small, so it doesn't need to be a giant feature. But if I just make a 1/8 of an inch turn there, then now I have to reselect my path, but it makes that turn. And sometimes if I put a fillet down there, it will make a turn that it wouldn't normally be able to make if it was just a 90-degree angle. But that's worked out pretty good, so I'm kind of shocked. But to go back to your question about splines and fully constraining them, I'm not sure that you can, short of drawing a grid pattern and then having your splines like line up on the points of the grid pattern. It's difficult to fully constrain a spline for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So the next item in our list is the Loft Tool. So we've got, I've got a body to name. This is our sweep. Oh. I'll go ahead and I'll turn off our sweep. I'll turn off our sweep path there, I suppose. And it's funny, we had Mike who's joining us here in class today. Mike T was saying, hey, I've got a project where I want to have a square on one side and I want to have a hexagon on the other. Is that right, Mike?
Circle on one, hex on the other.
Okay, cool. Well, let's make a circle on the other end of this one. So the Loft tool will let us take one shape that exists on a plane over on one side of space and convert it into another shape that exists on another plane that's kind of like exists parallel to that other plane. So in order to make a loft, we need to have another shape, and that shape needs to exist on a plane that is kind of like back here in space. So our first plane is this blue axis right here. The next plane needs to be back here somewhere, or I guess out in front. So we first need to create that plane. So in order to create a plane that is offset from the first plane that we drew on, from the construct menu, we're going to go ahead and choose the offset plane option. So it's the one at the very top of that menu. Up until this point of this class, we have been drawing sketches on planes that Fusion 360 has provided us straight away, right from the beginning. And now choosing this offset plane option will let us make a new plane based on an existing plane or surface. So I can make an offset plane based on one of these three existing planes here. Or if I turn on, for example, my extruded body, I can offset a plane from one of the faces of my extrude box. Or if I turn on my revolve body, I can make a plane offset from one of the flat faces of my cylinder here. I cannot make an offset plane based on the curve of my cylinder. So it's got to be a flat surface that you're making this offset from. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my revolve body there. And I'm just going to choose to make this plane offset from the same plane that I made my very first box sketch on. And once I choose that option, I've got another blue arrow. So this is an arrow that's very similar to the extrude arrow that we saw. And I can just give that a distance. Again, a negative number will go one way and a positive number will go another direction. So you can pick whichever is the direction that looks right for you. I'm making mine go a negative, let's make it -4. And then I'm going to say OK. So now we've got a fourth little yellow square that's kind of hovering back here. And we've got a construction folder that is popped up in our browser inside of our thing component. And I can spin down our little construction folder, and in that is the plane that exists. I'll say I've gotten really good at naming my sketches. I've gotten really religious about naming my bodies. I am much less apt to rename my construction planes, even though I think I probably should. It's those like intermediate steps where it's like, I just need to make this plane so I can make a sketch on it. And then I move right on after I make the plane and make the sketch. But it's probably best practice to name this. So this is our loft plane. All right, now that we've got that loft, that plane that exists parallel to our first plane, but offset a distance from it, we can create a sketch on this new plane now. So from our create menu, we can come down to this create sketch option. We can choose that fourth plane, or that plane that we just created, as the item we want to create our sketch on. And now from the create menu, I'm going to go ahead and grab the center diameter circle tool. So you could really use any tool that you wanted to. If you want, try using the ellipse tool, or try using the, try using a polygon tool if you want to. In fact, we don't use ellipse often. Let me do that. I'm going to use the ellipse tool. So the ellipse tool is very similar to using the circle tool. So first you'll have to specify where you want the center of the ellipse to be. So I'll just click and place the center of my ellipse. And now I'm moving my mouse out. And it's a click and move, not a click and drag. And I'm going to enter in a dimension of 4. And it didn't change. So I'm going to enter in a dimension of 3 just so you can see that it does indeed change. So once I enter in a dimension, now I have to define an angle. So if I hit the tab key, again, tab will bounce you back and forth between two dimensions in a sketch. And like I could type in 45 here, and it would make that 45-degree angle. So this is it is the width of the one side of your ellipse. So if I click now, do I have to enter? Nope. I'm not using that tool right. All right, so ellipse. I click to place my center and move my mouse out. And I'll take 3 and 45. And now, yep, I click one time. And now I move my mouse again, and this is defining the other length of my ellipse. So I've got an ellipse that's 3 inches in one way, and let's say 5 inches in another way, and it's also at a 45-degree angle. But again, we're just messing around, so you can make it whatever shape you want to. I'm not here to judge. That's Sparky's job. Sparky comes around, looks at all of our computers after class, gives us a thumbs up or thumbs down like a Roman emperor. And no. All right, cool. So the thing that I'm noticing about my ellipse is it's blue, and that is because even though it's constrained in dimension, it's not constrained in space right now, and I think I'm going to be fine with that for purposes of explaining how the Loft tool works. But I like to see sketches fully constrained, and in the real world you'll have a way to do that, and a reason and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to just say finish sketch. I've got a sketch folder or sketch in my sketches folder here that is my loft shape. And now if I look at this a little bit more three-dimensionally, like, wow, this is kind of tripping me out. I'm kind of confused about which is in front and which is in the back right now. So I'm just going to kind of go like that. So I'm looking at him more three-dimensionally here. And now we can choose our loft command. So from this loft option, I'm going to go ahead and choose the first profile, and then I'll choose the second profile, and it goes ahead and it makes a shape that kind of morphs one of those into another one. I'll mention that the loft command, you can also use a guide rail, which is what we pretty much did when we did our sweep. So our sweep, that path that it went along, you could also create a path that led from one of these shapes to the other shape, and it would follow that path. So right now, it just kind of takes the shortest path between those two. But you could draw guide rails that would make it kind of sweep inwards, or do a weird curvy thing, again within reason. So you could make an interesting shape between these two shapes. The path it took to get between the two shapes, you can control that as well using these guide rails and center line options here. But for now, I'm going to click OK here. And now, so we've got 10 minutes left. Does anybody want to pick one more item? We'll see if we can maybe get one or two more in. Bob or Mike, you guys have opinions? Do you want to see one of these over another one?
I'm looking through them.
Yeah.
I'm good. Whatever they pick.
What's that, Bob?
No, I'm open.
You're open. Okay, cool. What about you guys here in person? Do you guys have a preference of what you want to see one over another?
No.
No? So we've done a lot of stuff where you have to make a sketch first. Let's pop down here, because all the next segment here, from this dividing line down, these are things that you can make with without a sketch or with minimal sketches. So, for example, the pipe tool. I don't use this a whole lot, but I've been wanting to figure out how to make a whole class just using the pipe tool, because pipe can be a powerful thing. So, if we turn off our sketches, and if I'm just going to turn on the sweep path that I made, whatever sweep path you have, if it's curvy or a weird line like I've got, just like kind of 90-degree angle, that will all work for the pipe tool. And all the pipe tool requires is, like I said, that kind of path that you want your pipe to go along. And if I choose the pipe tool and I choose the path, it goes ahead and it will make a pipe, or a kind of a swept shape along that path. I can define the size of that pipe. So right now that's a 2-inch, I believe, diameter pipe, but I could make it 1 inch if I wanted to. I could change the section size to be square, so I could make almost that same shape that I made using the sweep tool, using this pipe command, and have less sketches or things to draw. I can choose to make it hollow. So let's say I'm making a frame out of 1/8 inch box aluminum or something like that I'm going to weld together. I could just draw that frame as a single line sketch and make it using this pipe command here, which is pretty cool. And then there's also this triangular option, so you can make triangular. I'm not sure how often you would need to make a triangular pipe, but it's there. And then anything other than those 3 shapes, maybe that's a great excuse to use the sweep command. If you got to make pipe, but it's not triangle, not square, or not circle, then that sweep command that we talked about might be a good next step from there. All right, I'm going to make this triangular, and then I'm going to say okay. And then, like, this was my loft, and then this body is my sweep body. Nope, I lied. This body is my pipe. Let's see, what else do we got here in our menu? Yeah, so these items all here. So that the very first thing we made was a box, right? And we made that box by first drawing a sketch. I guess technically you don't need to do that because you can use this box tool here. A box tool will still have you define, just like we had to define a plane that we're starting our box on. You have to define, or starting your sketch on, you have to define a plane that you're starting your box on. Now it's not going to spin me around once I pick the plane. I'm not going to get spun around so I see it kind of flat on. But I can click to place the first point of my rectangle, and now I'm defining my rectangle just like I did. So I can make this a 5 and then hit the tab key by 3. And then I believe I have to click. Yeah, so once I defined those 2 measurements, then I click, and now I've got a box window here, and now I can specify any length, any width, and any height that I'd like my box to be here. Again, I can make this a new body. I can choose to join this to an existing body. So if I had my revolve here and I wanted to join these 2 items together, I could be joining them together. I could be using it to cut away from any existing item. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, okay, why not? Sure. All the other items here will be defined the same way. Pretty much the only go-to that I have down here in this section is when I need to make a sphere. This is just a super easy way to make a sphere. Otherwise, you gotta make a half a circle and then revolve it around. There are probably advantages of that, but making a sphere is super easy. You just click to place a point, and then you drag out, and there's your sphere. Cool. So is that kind of what you were getting at? Like, just kind of go through some of those tools and show us how to use them one at a time. All right, we'll call that mission accomplished. Next week, we're going to start a new project. I just don't know what that project is right now. So if you have suggestions, I am open to hearing them. I've been wanting to try making a self-balancing robot, so that could be a fun thing for us to try to model and draw, is like a little small robot. I've also been thinking about something that we could do as a CNC project. So we haven't generated any G-code in Fusion for a while. So maybe there's a project we can come up with that'll involve generating some G code so we can use some of the expensive tools we got around here in the makerspace. So if you guys got any suggestions, I'd love to hear. You can, message me or drop them in the YouTube comments or however you want to communicate with me. I support that choice.
I have a request.
Yeah.
So my personal projects are at a stage where I've drawn like all the components, but I'm having a lot of problems assembling them together. So if we could do some assemblies, and if we could even do some like import McMaster car part and put in like a bolt or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. So, all right, right on. That's a good request. Some assembly and I use the McMaster car option all the time at work. We probably order more stuff from McMaster because it's so easy for me to drop them into Fusion. So yeah, we'll do something where we drop in some McMaster car components. McMaster's got all sorts of crazy cool stuff. They sell all the things. They're not a sponsor, but if they wanted to give me money, I would talk about them the same way because it's fantastic. All right, so yeah, that's a good request. I appreciate that. All right, so if there are no other questions, well, we'll call it a night. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Carl.
Oh, one more.